Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's Halloween special for Twish Tales. As always with my Halloween specials, I will warn you up front that there is going to be themes of horror today. Take care of yourself. If anything gets too intense or crosses any boundaries for you, feel free to mute it or come back to it later. New journal. Entry 1. It was never in question where my life would lead. It was determined before I was conceived. The gods, in their infallible and infinite wisdom, have plans for all of us, and as it was with me. They deemed it fitting that I should be born with the privilege of access to a repository of written tomes, and the blessing of a curious mind, as my parents had. From an early age I found particular interest in reading first-hand accounts and journals belonging to intrepid explorers and daring adventurers from faraway systems and regions. On occasion, the gods would see fit to bless me with the appearance of an autobiography from a surface dweller in the library of Mayfrintha. I would study that writing over and again on such occasions, obsessed with learning anything about the world beyond these tunnels. One specific curiosity my nigh insatiable mind returned to was that of the gods. Their place amongst each other, their relationships, and how much more they knew than I would ever learn, even if I lived as long as Archmires Joletha and read a book a day. Before I was enjoying locomotion via my own leg movements even, when I was barely 7 years of age, it was already clear that I was destined for a life in the church of Fuenlolofau, proudly bearing his emerald symbol, offering guidance to the lost, comforting and aiding the sick and wounded, protecting my fellow Mayfrintha residents. My days are tarnished, I am loath to admit, during times such as these, as the trials continue and more blasphemers and sorcerers are uncovered. I am fortunate by the blessings of the gods that I am not to be in the inenviable position Joletha finds herself in, forced to put these residents to death in the name of cleansing the town as a whole. But she does the duty with a hand so just as to only be guided by Geligspor himself. I could not be happy with my position and purpose in life. Here in the inner caves, life can be difficult, and those who suffer great hardship can easily lose their faith. So I am grateful to the gods that they granted me this unwavering strength in them, that I may offer the downtrodden a guiding hand back to their faith in their time of need. Alas, I must away, though joy becomes me when writing, as with reading. Without experiencing that which the day has to offer, I would quickly become bereft of muses about which to journal. I wonder what I shall write about next. Entry 2. Horror begins me when I realize that I am unable to read a book a day. Were it my way, I would do nothing but read books, day in and day out. For knowledge is to be divine. Understanding the gods can come only through understanding the world that the gods created. Alas, I must away, for someone needs my attention. I wonder what I shall write about next. Entry 3. I mentioned before that someone had come for my need, for my attention. It means much to me that the people of Meifrintha come to me for answers, just as I seek the guidance of Joletha. While we cannot hope to have the same level of knowledge as the divine creators, with such access to their endless wealth of knowing, the Archmires are rarely at a loss for understanding. However, when my closest friend, Thlanian, came to me today, he was in such distress as I had not seen before. He asked of Fwynlofau, through my spiritual connection to him, why he saw fit to let the thumper vines fail in their deterring nature. For one of the very creatures the vines were biologically engineered to cause to flee made its presence known at his rock shroom farm this after trance. A purple worm, thankfully diminutive in mass, raised his crops and opened new tunnels betwixt his farm and the bereft lands. How am I to get this answer for him? Shall I pray to Fwynlofau for his wisdom over the domain of rocks and caves? Entry 4. Fwynlofau is all-knowing, as are all the gods. As is my purview as a cleric to the pantheon, the gods are numerable, and each deserving of worship. But given our existence here in the inner caves, Fwynlofau, god of rocks, caverns, the Underdark, mountains on the surface world, it seems he requires our attention and worship a little more than the others. Entry 5. I decide that Thlanian deserves an answer, even if I do not know it myself. As such, I pray to Fwynlofau. I follow all the usual procedures that Fwynlofau requires, and yet I feel no connection to him. Curiously, I feel bereft of my connection. Perhaps there is something further afoot here. I'm not sure how to proceed. I am curious whether clerics beyond myself are feeling the same way. Perhaps I should speak to the other clerics of the temple. I decide to try and connect with the other deities in the pantheon. While I am less versed in how those particular deities like to be worshipped, I do feel my training and education in such matters, my obsession, some have called it, has put me in a position where I am confident they should have answered. And yet, I find no connection. This seems to be beyond me. I start to feel concerned, worried even. Entry 6. A thought occurs to me that perhaps it's the cleansing of the city that is affecting my connection with the gods. One would think that ridding the city of heretics and blasphemers, the non-believers, should only help to strengthen our connection as a city as a whole. I decide to go and see Haimires Joletha. I seek out Joletha at a great expedient rate. She is in the temple, and she seems to be working hard. This morning was another cleansing, and she is praying to the gods. I'm not sure if I should interrupt her. Entry 7. I decided to not interrupt, but to observe. Perhaps there is more I could learn from watching her. Alas, as I sidled behind one of the pews my aim to silently observe her behaviours, unfortunately the dimness of the interior occluded that of a candlestick nearby, and I bumped into it, sending the molten wax sprawling as the brass relief on the candlestick clashed into that of the pews, drawing great attention to my presence. And much as I tried to not interrupt her doings, I found that she was interrupted all the same. She turned and walked over to me. I apologized for interrupting, greeting her with the respect appropriate for a person in her position. I asked of the topic of which brought me here, inquiring as to whether she had the same concerns. I have never been wonderful with people, but given my connection with Joletha and my entire life spent in devotion to the same God as her, I feel I have certain insight into her behaviours. Such is the case that in my discussion with her, though she tried to console me and explain that she had no such disconnect to the gods, and that the gods are merely too busy to talk to me, I could not help but see an element of deception in her eye. The way her mouth crinkled as she spoke, the way that she could not meet my gaze. There was something about it that she was hiding. I decided in that moment that I should ask about the cleansing. Why it was decided that it would take place, and what triggered this disconnect. Alas, I have never really had a way with words. My tongue caught in my mouth, and feeling the words were impetuous, impertinent, I thought better than to challenge someone of her position on the decisions of the gods. Instead, I decided to ask her recommendation about this problem. It seems she had heard of this purple worm issue, and she explained that the gods were already providing a solution. In the lower levels of the city, there is a room dedicated to rituals, and she has asked that I go with her to perform such a ritual. The thumper vines have failed, she told me, because of a lack of worship to the correct gods, while we have been showing devout worship to Fuinilofau, we have not been paying due respect to those whose domain include that of purple worms. I was left to decide whether this ritual was something that I wanted to be a part of. Entry 8. Of course, I agreed to being a part of this ritual. If worship is required, worship is what we will do. I have, after all, spent my entire life devoted to understanding the boundaries of worship, understanding and exploring that which could be pushed further. The gods, after all, gave us everything. Without them we are nothing. And they are so kind to pay attention to each and every one of us and what we need, that the least we can do is spend our lives devoted to worshipping them. Surely there is more we can do. I followed Joletha down through the city to the lower edges. She requested that Thlanian come along too. After all, it was he whose crops were destroyed by the purple worm. Entry 9. Flanian is concerned that this may be too trivial for the gods. He has wonders as to why his crops were targeted. Did he fail in some way? I have tried to remind him that the gods pay close attention to each and every creature of their creation, just as he tended to his individual rock shrooms. Yes, we are many to their few, but they are powerful beyond us. And if he has faith, the purpose of his trials will surely become clear. Lack as I may in my abilities with words, it seemed to offer him some comfort. Entry 10. Faith though I have in Jolotha, I could not help but have fleeting doubt that this cleansing could be something that I would witness as we headed to the lower city. I have no concern that Jolotha would cleanse myself. It is only the non-believers and heretics that she seems to be involving herself with ridding from the city. Nevertheless, to assuage any doubts, I decide to ask Jolotha on the journey what the ritual entailed. Entry 11. The conversation with Jolotha assuaged my doubts in a great way. As we entered the Mephrinthan foundations, the ritual hall opened before me. I've had little to no reason to enter these halls before, and I could not help but feel the honour which was granted me in this moment to be a part of such a auspicious occasion. Jolotha, convincing as she is, fantastic with words, explained that this is a stabilization ritual to offer the worship that has been given to one across the many, and to explain to the pantheon that we have not forgotten any of them. For while there is a god of rocks, there is also a god of beasts. Altres is capable with his understanding of all things that move, whether the worms be small on the surface or large rock tunneling ones down here. It is not simply to one god that we should pay our dues, and a ritual of balance must be conducted so that we may pass our worship onto each appropriately. With my special interest in history and historical events, Entry 12, I have studied the archives in my mind, the remembered fractions and passages from various books. I do not recall a time when such a cleansing was necessary in Mephrintha. However, Mephrintha is a very old settlement. It was once that of the Deep Gnomes, the Svirfneblin. Then the history of Mephrintha is long and varied, as the native folk that were once here were colonized by my ancestors. The Drow have a reputation among those on the surface world. Through the annals and annuals and journals that I've managed to read from the surface dwellers, it seems they are fearful of many of my kind. I do not blame them for such inadequate understanding of my culture. After all, most things down here must kill or be killed. Entry 13. The ritual began with Flanian, myself, and Archmistress Jolotha lighting candles, illuminating the bas reliefs in the stonework of the various god symbols. 4 is the number, and the number is 4, as say the ancient texts. As such, for each domain, 4 have their gods. 4 in each domain. 4 in the good, 4 in the bad, and 4 in each. 32 gods total in the Numa, the greater gods, each in power equal. As I got the opportunity to look around this ancient ritual hall, keen were my eyes, adjusted to the dark, and keener still when the candles were lit. Very clearly could I see all 32 reliefs, even that of the forbidden gods were down here, because forbidden as they are, for the case of balance in the cosmos, the good must be balanced with the bad, and praying to the ones of decay and undeath are just as necessary in the grand scheme. My eyes landed on the symbol to Gelisbor, the god of justice and protection. A shield with crossed weapons. I closed my eyes in prayer to him, not wanting to question the decisions of Archmires Jolitha, yet still wanting answers. I requested simply confirmation if those being cleansed deserved the punishments, and was it truly the justice of the gods? Alas, it seemed I was not to get a response here. I must put my faith in Jolitha. Entry 14. The ritual seemed to be going without issue. As expected, we were to follow the lead of the one that we put our trust in. However, chant as we might, following Jolitha's lead, it was not the only sound to be heard echoing through the caves this night. The sound of screaming could be heard from outside, far away in the bereft lands, but unmistakable and getting closer. The tunnels of the inner caves have a certain way of distorting the distance to one's quarry. And as the sounds continued, it was clear, distance unknown, they were at least getting closer. Of course, my eyes darted to Jolitha to see if she was worried. And worried she was, but with a calm understanding that very little could occur to us that she would not be able to handle. I looked to her guidance as to whether we would continue the ritual. She agreed that we must. Reading from her face, I wondered whether she would know that this situation was about to happen, and she brought us here to keep us safe, or even, worse still, to put us in a worse position. I did not see anything on her face or body language that would explain to me that she was aware of this predicament that we found ourselves in. So redoubling our efforts into the ritual, I could not help but find my mind distracted with trying to identify the sounds that were approaching our village. Alas, with the echoing of certain phonemes over others in the walls of the Underdark, it is difficult to be able to pinpoint exactly what creatures are approaching. Suffice it to say that I heard claws on stone and great wet slaps. Entry 15. Whether or not the ritual was complete is a little much of a blur to me at the moment, for I could not concentrate on worshipping the gods when part of my duties as a cleric to Fwynglofau was to protect those of my fellow denizens. I used the blessings of the gods on the three of us present casting the ritual, and felt a little more prepared for what was to come. Similarly, Joletha seemed to dig down to some of her abilities and offer aid to us in this moment. We felt a little bolstered and stronger, and it was only in the nick of time as the doors to this ritual room burst open, and in came a swarm of undescribable horrors. I was able to maintain my composure, despite the terrors I was seeing. These creatures were crimson in nature. In flashes of the candlelight, I was able to see the colour on their scaly skin. This several feet tall, muscular creature that looked like it deserved to belong under a great underground aquifer. Perhaps some sort of amphibian. Here in the inner caves, water sources are scarce, and creatures that survive only in water even scarcer. Thankfully, well learned as I am, I was able to ascertain that there were no creatures that I had seen before, certainly no kobolds. The best I could do is that they seemed to be amphibious of sorts, but little time did I have to reflect on this before they attacked. Thankfully, my initiative and the blessings of the god seemed to allow me quick movement to go before they. As they ran towards us, claws seemed to emerge from their fingers. I was able to count at least 3 of them, but more sounds behind. Summoning my best, strongest, most commanding voice, I shouted at the foremost of them to flee. Alas, my words seemed to fall on strong mind, and my magic had no effect. Joletha and my friend Flanian were able to act before they managed to get to us. Joletha's words of prayer managed to provide Thlanian a little extra bolstered speed, a little extra bolstered energy. And he rushed away from them to the outer walls of the bas relief on the left-hand side of this ritual chamber, preventing them from targeting him first. Alas, this is all we managed to accomplish before the creatures were upon us. Despite the protection that I was offered by the breastplate I wear, their claws were sharp enough to dig through and to find the purchase of the soft flesh beneath. Long, terrible, sickle-like claws protruded from their fingers and scratched into me. It was a significant wound, and I felt blood starting to pool. The second of these creatures rushed to Joletha, and despite her devout devotion to the gods of protection, unfortunately, in this moment, the gods saw fit to put her into an element of duress, perhaps to test her faith. And she was slashed. Seemingly using tactics to spread themselves among the three combatants in the room, the other saw fit to double his movements, double his energies and speeds towards my friend Thlanian. Thlanian running from the threat towards the wall. While the benefit was that he was able to avoid such a claw on this turn, unfortunately he had backed himself into a corner, and were we not quick to act, he would be surrounded by them soon. I was lucky to see that the gash, though deep into my arm, was not something to have severed nerve or gotten to vital organs. It was a deep wound to muscle and fissure. Drawing the short sword by my side, I decided to fight the way that they intend. They were slashing with claws. I will slash with a short sword. And as I did so, I spoke a word of protection on Joletha, praying for the gods to offer her some sort of sanctuary in this moment. My sword struck true. I pierced it forwards and managed to hit the horrific creature. Alas, as it struck, the little mind that it paid to the damage I had dealt was very clear that this thing was not to be defeated lightly, and I realized in this moment, in a battle of attrition, I had the lower hand by far. Joletha, with a word of the divine, managed to summon to her the emerald symbol of our god, a brilliant white light, which, sparking from itself, managed to strike the monster in front of me, leaving it glittering with a golden radiance. While this radiance seemed to illuminate the weaker spots that I should aim for with my sword, I could not help feel deterred by how little it seemed to be affected by the damage it had been dealt. I was unable to see in my fervid state of self-preservation exactly what Llanion was accomplishing, but from the sounds of his belaboured breathing, I could tell that he was struggling. And before I know it, they were upon us once more. A second time did I feel the sting of their claws. And a second time did I suffer a great gash across my torso. I was pushed back, the breastplate thankfully taking the brunt of the momentum of the claw strike. And thankfully again, with it being superficial, I suffered no additional effects beside that of the pain and initial blood loss. My sanctuary spell, however, had seemingly worked its magic and protected the attack on Joletha, but as fickle as the decisions may seem, the spell required this creature to turn its attention on someone else, and the only peoples in its vicinity were myself or Llanion. It decided to go for Llanion. Running towards it, it turned its back on me for a split moment, and I had to make the snap decision as to whether to attack it. It seemed like a very quick decision. I struck out with my sword, and unfortunately, healer as I am not as well versed in the protective arts of hand-to-hand combat, and this thing had hardened scales. My sword struck true, but caused not an inch of gash within it. The creature made it the distance across the stone floor of the ritual hall to Llanion and attacked. Llanion, I could see the gash from here. It seemed to be deep. It seemed to be very deep. And farmer as he was, Llanion's constitution unfortunately failed him in this moment. He dropped to his knees, but was able to catch himself and restand. It was not it was not looking good. Jolatha shouted to run, and I had to make the decision whether we were running or not. Many possibilities crossed my mind. I could command them to betray. I could try and heal my friend, or we can run. At the advice of my superior, I decided to run. Having seen what can occur when someone turns their back on a creature such as this, I decided to back away cautiously from this fight, using my sword to deflect the incoming claws, so as to not get struck from behind. I ran round the offender and towards the opening to this ritual hall, and turned back to beckon that Llanion follow. Llanion, seemingly at a loss as to how to escape such a situation with two offenders on him, was provided an opportunity when Jolefa, breaking my sanctuary spell on her, reached out and connected to the gods one last time in paralyzing one of the offenders that was closer to the door. Flanian took this opportunity to run, and while one of them feebly thrust out at him, it seemed his paralyzed friend got in the way, and Flanian was able to escape without further attack. He made it to myself at the door, and we turned and escaped into the night. As we ran, however, I was left with the decision to focus all my efforts on speed in escaping this ritual, or to spend some of my focus and attention on healing my friend. It was barely a decision. I focused on the teachings of Shirali, the goddess of healing and purity, cleanliness, and medicine. And through her blessings of me, though connection to prayer seemed bereft, my own connection to her magics seemed still true, and I was able to cure my friend's wounds as we ran. It would still require a little rest, perhaps, but he was far better now than he was, as I healed up the enormous gash in his abdomen. And then we turned our attentions to escape. Alas, though my eyes are accustomed to the dark, as all my ancestors have been, the sensitivity of our retinas to the smallest modicum of photons in the presence comes with a sword just as sharp on the reverse. This double-edged sword, though allowing us vision in the dark rather well, comes with a certain sensitivity to light. And as we rounded a corner, light there was. Standing before us, another of these creatures, with the darkness barely all I can see is shades of grey. But in this moment it held its hand out in front, and a light began from its hand. A light as bright as the sun seemed to illuminate. This was the first time that I had ever witnessed this phenomenon known as the sun. I had read about it from the surface dwellers' journals many a time, but its beauty came with a danger, as many things do, and I was blinded. That is not the worst of my troubles, however, as after blinding me, I was unable to see the trap that it had laid in front. Stumbling forwards to try and get into range to summon the magic of the gods to attack this creature, my foot did not find the purchase of the ground. And judging from the sound of Flanian's yelp of surprise, nor did his, and we began to fall. In an instant, we were tumbling down rock and outcroppings, potentially attempting to remain as dexterous as we could to stay on our feet, to save ourselves. I was able, but Flanian was not. And it seems he fell, his ankles twisting as he hit the ground hard. at the base of the pit. I also hit the ground hard, but I was able to stay on my feet and bend at the knees to absorb some of that shock. Self-preservation kicking in this moment, knowing that we were as vulnerable now as a fish in a barrel. I grabbed Thlanian by the shirt and pulled him far over to the walls of this pit, only to discover, in my temporarily blinded state, that it was not a pit so much as a cave-in to a tunnel system below. This offered us a moment of relief, as the gods perhaps looked down on us with favour, protecting us, sheltering us from the eyes of the thing above. I tucked us up against the wall and listened, trying to hear, over the sounds of my own belabored breathing and heart beating, whether the thing was following us down into the hole. My ears, as keen as they are for sounds in the Underdark, were able to ascertain that nothing had followed us through the hole. Through the sounds of blasting from above, arcane wrenching of space, Joletha was using her might to fight her way out of the ritual room, and had rounded the corner to attack the creature that had blinded us. I sent up a quick prayer. Interestingly, it was probably the strongest prayer I've ever achieved. I felt that in the moment the gods were blessing us. My eyes blinked the blindness from them, and I looked around. I was able to tell that we were in the deepest dark depths of the city. The parts of the foundations where nothing had been built. The solid stone rock. The igneous rock that was difficult to carve through, but provided great foundation for the protection of the city from beneath. Realizing now that the distance that we had fallen, it was improbable to think that we would be able to climb back out. But knowing that these tunnels were old and intertwining, I knew that there would be some way to find another path back to the city. Thlanian was not so injured as to be able to not be able to walk. And so getting him to his feet, I had a decision to make as to how to get out of here. Entry 19. I have investigated the walls of the tunnels. It seems that these are not created by purple worms. As unfamiliar as I am with the creatures directly, God's willing, I know at least the remnants of what one's tunnels look like. They are of a almost spherical nature, almost cylindrical nature, with smoother walls and remnants of the beast's mucus left behind. If these were created by a purple worm, then it was many eons ago, and it has since been weathered into a rough non-hewn surface. It seems these tunnels perhaps were lava tubes. In my exploration of the tunnels to try and ascertain their origin, I was unable to see if any were more used than another. It was my understanding that these tunnels were probably never used by sentient creatures for centuries now. I decided in this moment to take the opportunity to catch my breath and heal. Calling upon the gods, great wisdom, I healed a great amount of my deep wounds. Bleeding as they still were at the end of our spell, however, at least they were not deep and life-threatening. I felt strong enough to continue at this point. I tried to guide myself. This would be entry 20. Entry 20. I decided to guide myself and Thlanian on their way out of this tunnel. My confidence a little stronger than his. My understanding of medicine prevailing, I could tell that Thlanian was doing a little worse than I, but still within the realms of able and willing to proceed. His wounds were superficial. At this point, I called upon my survival skills to understand how to map the tunnels in my mind and get back to a place that I was familiar with. And so onward we pressed. Entry 21. These tunnels are longer than I thought. Entry 22. I'm beginning to lose track of how long I've been down here, and which direction I was meant to be going. Entry 23. Thlanian seems to be a capable, physical-bodied person, having spent his time as a farmer, harvesting rock shrooms. He has much more physical strength than I, so I handed him my sword in case he would get better use of it should we come across dangers. Entry 24. Thlanian is complaining of stomachache. That is to be expected, given that he was slashed in the stomach by a large, aberrant creature. But my medicine shows that he is unlikely to die from the extent of his wounds. Entry 25. I'm starting to get hungry. It must have been hours since we fell down the hole. All sounds of life behind us have gone. I'm even considering trying to go back and waiting for someone to drag us up the pit via a rope if possible. Entry 26. The stomachaches are getting worse. Thlanian is complaining that it feels like he has food poisoning of sorts. Investigating his wounds is difficult in such circumstances given the low light. But I was able to tell that there does not seem to be anything of a magical nature about them, despite accepting the fact that I had cured them and stitched them shut with my healing. Entry 27. I have decided that the hunger is becoming a problem for me now. And perhaps a good meal is enough to settle Thlanian's stomach. calling on the gods of the harvest and food. It seems they answered my prayer this time, as I created food and water enough for both of us, and we settled to eat. Entry 28. After eating and resting a short while, Flanian and I were both feeling a little more strong, our energy replenished. We felt it possible to continue on. Entry 29. The floors have started squelching. Entry 30. The walls are wet, yet I cannot hear the dripping of water. Though I cannot hear it, I have decided to move towards the sense of humidity in the air, for where there is water, there is life. And when there is life, well, in the inner caves it can be danger or savior. I feel confident in our abilities to use this life to our advantage. Entry 31. I was not going to bring it up myself, as I felt it simply a paranoia of the mind. But when Flanian explained that he feels like something is watching us, I realized it was not just I that felt that way. There are eyes down here. For the sake of us both, I retained my composure. But not only once did I consider the possibility that we could be inside of a purple worm. I dismiss this as ridiculous, of course. But Flanian does not dismiss it so quickly, and I hear him scraping the edges of my sword against the walls. I turn to see him trying to press to see if he could pierce the outer edges of the wall. Thankfully, it seems to be solid stone, simply wet with some sort of mucus. I managed to sustain to hold on to my panic and prevent it from overwhelming me. Entry 34. No, 33, 32. I'm starting to lose track. Entry 32. It feels strange down here. I wish I could say more, but the words seem to fail as they try to get to my mind. I must remain strong in my faith of the gods. The gods are leading me on a path. Perhaps this is a pilgrimage. Perhaps there is something at the end of this that the gods wish for me to see, or an experience that they wish for me to have. The smell is something like I've never experienced before. It is almost like that of rotting food, but damp. Perhaps this is the smell that I've read adventurers on the surface world describe as swamp. I've always wanted to see a swamp, but perhaps I should be careful of what I wish for. Entry 35. Both of us are reluctant to admit it, but we decided we are too tired to continue. We are going to try and find some way to sleep. Drawing on my understanding of the books I have read on survival tactics for the tunnels, it seems that our safety would come from having something low enough ceilinged to not allow for creatures to drop on us in ambush. but a wide enough thing that we can see any creatures coming from our ground level. We want to keep our back to the walls. Between the two of us, Flanian thankfully helps us to find a gallery, a large open room of a cave, and it seems to be dry enough that we find a patch of wall to rest against. Before going to sleep, entry 34, before going to sleep, I decide to bring out my bone dice. That which I use to, when unsure of my decisions, to ask the gods of whether or not we should keep going or turn back. As I roll the dice and they hit the ground, one at a time, I am granted with visions. Hallucinations, both visual and auditory, accompany the rhythmic clack of the bone against stone. I'm granted the smell of a strong sense of stagnant water and decay. I'm granted a vision of some sort of pulsating pustule atop the edge of a stagnant water source. When the dice bounces and hits the stone again, the pustule breaks, and thousands of small flagellating creatures are released into the water. The sounds of squelching, the sounds of croaking, a cacophony of insect sounds. I have only heard insects a small number of times when I venture to the sickness rooms, the sickness systems, in order to harvest. This does not sound or feel like I should be continuing this way. The gods are leaving me with a sense of woe. I'm left with a decision as to whether to share my visions and decisions with Flanian, or whether to let him rest and set off back in the morning, or in the after trance. I managed to maintain my composure for long enough to make the decision to let him rest. I tell him that I will stay up first while he rests. And I once again thank the gods in their blessings that I be blessed with the anatomy where, while resting, we maintain awareness of our surroundings. Should I have been unfavorably born as one of the dwarves, or even humans, I would be rendered unconscious while resting. And what's more, we would be unconscious for a good third of the day. It is lucky that we have elven anatomy. Entry 30, and then the number is unreadable. It is hard to tell whether the creatures that have approached me in the night are real or not. At first, of course, I was cautious, but whipping my attention to them, they disappeared into the darkness of the cavern. worried that they were able to become ethereal of sorts. I maintained my awareness as best I could. I think this cavern is playing tricks on me. I am unable to tell whether I am awake or asleep. Entry. I am pretty sure I am sleeping. Is this what sleep feels like? I have never experienced this unconsciousness that the others have, but this does not feel like a usual trance. Something stretches out from the cavern darkness, and though I look at it, it does not fade away. Unlike the others before, this appendage grows stronger when I look at it. It seems like something, an ambulatory locomotor appendage perhaps, something without joints or bones. I have read about such creatures in the Eternal Descent. Everything I have read about the Eternal Descent makes me loath to go there, and I am concerned that we have found ourselves with no way back to the inner caves. Still, I maintain my composure, but it is getting more difficult. This appendage that seems to grow out of the darkness towards me seems smooth and wet, like it is entirely made of some sort of rubberish texture. But as it lifts up and reveals the bottom, it seems there are circular sort of attachments on the bottom. Perhaps that is how it gets purchase. As Thalanian shakes me, I realize that yes, I was trancing, and perhaps that is what my first time experiencing dreams is like. I feel like I have, at the very least, had some form of rest. Thankfully, my natural constitution is strong enough that I was able to feel fully rested from this. Flanian, from the looks of his face, was less rested during the night. He seems somewhat exhausted. Entry. Were it not for the entry before, I would not have believed that I was awake. But there it is, written in plain Under-Elvish. It is something I experienced. This thing. I describe what I saw to Thlanian, and he describes it as a tentacler. I have never heard of a tentacler, but he says that there are many creatures down here that possess them. At this point, I explained to Thlanian that we should head back. The gods, in their visions and their infinite wisdoms, have decided to look over us and bless us with the knowledge that we are going the wrong direction, getting ourselves into more trouble. Entry. We have proceeded back the way that we came, or at least the way that we tried to remember that we came. With Thlanian's help, we are pretty confident that we are heading the right way. and yet the walls do not look like they did yesterday. However, as we walk, it seems that the air is getting lighter, a little easier to breathe. There is some sort of recognition among the two of us that there is a large open cavern system somewhere nearby. And open cavern usually means settlement. I wonder if we should go towards it. We decide to go towards it, but doing so as stealthily as we can, so as to not attract attention in case they are hostile. Entry. We reach the edge of this canyon. If it was possible for a city of this magnitude to exist somewhere below our own city, it surely should have been written about. I have read everything there is to know about the history of Mefrintha, how it was once settled by gnomes and then attacked by dwarves, how it was colonized by my people. This was millennia ago. And yet, this city makes ours look like it is a frontier town, simply being established. The magnitude of the city I look down on is indescribable. It is huge and ancient, but it is just as abandoned as it is old. There are no signs of life, no signs of light, no sounds. The air around this cavern seems stagnant and stale. Lanyon has nothing to add as to this city. He is not as well versed in history as I. Entry. I made the decision that we should not enter this city, and as we turned back to the tunnels, we found ourselves in the streets. I do not recall climbing down the canyon face to get to the streets. I definitively recall making the decision not to enter the city. And yet here we are. And as we stroll the streets of this city, the thing that strikes me is the architecture is unlike anything I've ever heard of. To the untrained eye, it is difficult to understand the differences between the architecture of various cultures, but having studied it for so long as I have, fascinated by different languages and how they form the notions of those respective cultures, I have never heard of dwarves making buildings like this. While most things in the inner caves carve their residences out of the very rockwork that makes up the protection of our cities, the rockwork that the gods created back at the origin of life, It seems these ones were not carved from the surroundings. They are certainly too large for gnomes. Much too large for even elves. The doorways are not connected to the grounds, as though the things that use them have no restrictions by gravitational pull downwards. I ask Thlanian if he still feels like we're being watched, and he agrees. That feeling is still there. Entry. I looked around for signs of arcana. Thankfully, being very well versed in it, it did not take me long to find them. The streets seemed to radiate outwards from a central point, and we felt drawn to investigate. At the center of this city, an enormous temple. As far as arcane runes are concerned, I would not be sure confidently whether the runes inscribed on every inch of this temple stone was that of arcane or religious nature. There are great slabs of concrete, unnatural rock created by the arcane, walls of stone. There are slabs on which there are dark stains. Feeling it was necessary to illuminate for colour, I lit up the symbol on my chest, the emerald glowing bright, and I was able to determine for myself, unfortunately, that my suspicions of this dark stain on slab was dark blood. A brownish, rusty colour. But the blood had stained and weathered the stone eons before. Not recently, not by a long way. I turned to see if we're facing the same way, and it seems that the street that we walked down is not behind me, but to the side. My directionality in this place seems non-Euclidean. There is no sign of life in here, but I turn back to the runes written on the stones, and remembering the ritual that I taught myself as to how to translate certain languages, I implore to the god of language and pray. As it grants me the ability to understand spoken or signed language, or language that I speak can be interpreted, perhaps it will offer me some understanding if we do come across any creature that lives here. The thought occurs to me that perhaps there was a cleansing here in this city long ago. If there was, maybe it was related to what I'm experiencing now. Unfortunately, Thlanian's stomachache is back. It feels worse than before. I look at the temple, knowing that if I was in a situation where I needed to heal a friend of something worse than just wounds, it would be to the temple that I go. I consider whether it is worse or better that we enter this temple in search of some way to recover for him. I consider restoring him, but with my experience in the ways of the church, I'm only able to restore to a lesser extent, and he is not seemingly afflicted by those which I could fix. Perhaps poison. It's a consideration that I should think about. Is it worth me using some of my energy to try and rid him of poison? Entry. I decided to try and restore him of his poison affliction. Alas, it seemed to have no effect on his stomachache. He seemed to be complaining that it was now a little more of a chest pain, a dull heartburn of sorts. Thinking better than to go into the temple, I wonder what it is that we are wanting to do in this town, why we were brought here by the gods. For the gods have purpose and understanding of everything. There is nothing beyond the comprehension of the gods, the power and will of the gods. If we are here, it is because of their doing. I consider finding supplies. Perhaps if this was an abandoned city, a city abandoned in a hurry, there may be some long-lasting rations or water supply that we could make use of. Medicine, perhaps. And so we enter the nearest house. Away from the temple, we find a house that has a door low enough that we can get into. Upon entering this house, however, my mind is having a difficult time understanding the formation of the architecture within. Stairs would have no purpose in a place where things can float. So why are there stairs in here? Or a more pertinent question, why are they sideways? As I think of them, they seemed to shift in perspective. No, it was me who was sideways, and as I came to that realization, I fell to the ground. Luckily, I did not hurt myself, but I did find that I was in a room that made no sense to me. I search around for anything of use in this room. Through will of the gods and the guidance of the gods, I was able to find something of note, something of worth. The food is not edible here. What food there was long since turned to dust. In the millennia it's been since this city was bereft of life. But what I did find of interest were religious etchings on the walls, similar to those we have heard of our great ancestors before language was as complex and understood. We needed to get stories across to one another, and to maintain those stories down through the ages when there are no one there to hear them. And so began the beginnings of written tradition, cave markings, etchings, scratchings in the walls. These primitive drawings, though of a culture never before seen by me, are easy enough to interpret due to the scale of the tiny creatures beneath and the enormous piscine creature that seems to float overhead of them. Little more than stick drawings, it is clear that they are kneeling, looking up to something that I can only imagine was a god to them. Perhaps it is one of the gods that we have now. Perhaps it is even Arashal, the god of waterways. Perhaps one day, long ago, this place had a source of water. would not be unusual for the fluid nature of rock over this much time, for an earthquake to have blocked off a source of water from above, and perhaps through dehydration this city was abandoned. But not before praying out to the gods of fish-like quality, the gods of water. It is hard to say for sure, but these people were as religious as I. I know that much for sure. I turned to offer Thlanian a drink. The concept of water reminding me of holy water. And perhaps the holy water would offer him some sense of relief from his growing pain. Entry. I have searched this house 3 times now. Every room that I can get to seems to switch my perspective of where I am and how I came in. I have fallen to my shoulder multiple times. It is starting to hurt. But one thing I can say for sure is Thlanian is not in this building with me. I was confident he entered behind me, but he is not with me. I take my holy water out, and washing my hands in it, I rinse some on my face to try and keep composure. And then I drip some on the ground to see if it reacts. Unfortunately, as well as I have done so far to maintain my composure, I feel it starting to slip. Not only did my composure slip, but I am ashamed to say I have just recovered from a bout of stress. I do not know what entry I am up to, but I have succumbed to momentary madness. I'm not sure how long I was unconscious for, but I fainted. Perhaps it was a panic attack. I wake feeling less stable than I was before, but I need to get out of this house. Through thorough investigation, I am able to find the entrance once more, and I'm once again back out into the streets. The town centre in front of the enormous, immeasurable, ancient stone temple, made out of materials I barely even recognize, with gargoyle-like reliefs set into the surface of it that I now realize are tentacled. These things protruding from the faces of the gargoyles, they seem like the tentacles that were reaching out to me in my dream. Entry. I looked for my friend Thlanian, and alas, I could not find him. I cannot help but feel like this is a hallucination, like I should do some sort of reality check. I am worried, however, that if I dig down deep into my mind in an attempt to see fact from fiction, that if I fail, I could reinforce the hallucination. Do I want to try? In doing so, I'm able to maintain my composure and stave off any sort of panic. What's more is I'm able to see through certain hallucinations, certain delusions that are present to me. I feel my mind returning to myself once more as I no longer panic. I breathe. I consider that the gods have a plan for me and that they want me to be here. I look around for Thlanian. I do not see him, but there is an open doorway off of this plaza, one that I did not explore yet. If I was him, and perhaps looking for where I had gone, that may be where I would try. The streets seem more stable now. Like whatever it was that was causing them to feel non-Euclidean has perhaps been dissipated for now. I remove a bottle of ink from my bag, the ink with which I've been writing these entries, and I take a dab of it to leave on the threshold of this doorway, if you can even call it that. Climbing up into the doorway, I look around for Thlanian. Thankfully, I've always been good at investigating for signs and clues. My curious mind, blessed to me by the gods, makes it easy to see that Thlanian has indeed been in this room. There are no stairs. It seems like a single, almost cylindrical room. And as I look upwards, I see that there is a shelf of sorts, a nook, an inlet into the wall, like that which would be used to house a structure containing storage space, or perhaps even in those found in ossuaries, the carved out structures in the walls that are used to maintain the bodies that are placed in cemetery-like crypts. On this platform is where I see the clue that he was once here. Blood. Fresh blood. Still wet, but tacky blood. My panic starts to set in again, and I decide to run. Unfortunately, I lose composure in this moment. The very real possibility that my friend has been subjected to some further horror without me there to protect him sends me once again into a bout of stress. I am considered temporarily broken. I feel like without me getting out of this city, my mind will never be fully able to re-heal itself. And as I run in fear from whatever it was in this house that attacked my friend, I find that my legs are not my own, my direction purposeless. And that is how I found myself in the temple. I do not recall being able to push open the enormous doors. Perhaps they opened for themselves as I approached. All I know for sure is that I stand here at what can only be understood as an ancient, unfathomably old altar. Beneath the feet of a statue whose scale would make even the greatest of giants feel like an ant. The roof of this temple should not be this tall, should not be tall enough to see the head of this monster. The statue has a face that is painful to look at. My already broken mind seems to wince in pain the more I try to comprehend the vision of what I am looking at. This thing with more legs and arms and claws than any one creature should have. A body that is sheer mountain in size. It is so unfathomably large that it almost detracts from the body of my friend lying atop the altar. Written in blood, beside my friend, his own fresh blood, a word of jumbled letters. As a linguist, I am studied and well-versed in many languages, but this is not one I understand. Fbudnoye. 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 3 times is written by his body. Where did the blood come from? Why, from the open wound in his chest, of course. A large, gaping hole, with ribs broken outwards, as if the pressure from something within grew too large to be able to maintain. It seems that not only is his flesh torn and ragged from the explosion of force from within, but it seems gnawed on. I can tell from my angle that his heart is missing, and that something has eaten it. There is movement to my left. I turn to the darkness just in time to see something, some flagellating movement, as if floating through air, as if swimming, propelled by some sort of tail into the shadows. I turn and run. My mind still broken, but my legs now back to myself. I run, and I run. My thumping feet on the stonework of this temple, echoing out, relaying the same beating rhythm of my heart, but not quite as fast. I can tell that this thing is swimming after me, swimming through air as easily as water. I am getting closer to the door, but I feel it is getting closer to me. Whether I will make it to the door before it makes it to me, I am unsure. Alas, it seems to have more initiative than I. And as I make it to the door, slowing myself long enough to focus some energy on casting Sanctuary to prevent it from attacking me, I turn just in time to see it reach me. This is unmistakably related to the things that attacked us in the temple, but it is young and small. The dark vision provided to me by my anatomy is not the strongest at ascertaining colour, but I can tell it is not of a dark crimson as the ones before. If I was to guess, I would assume it is perhaps blue. It is also of a different form. Though around the size of a gnome, it has 4 limbs and a flagellating tail, and protruding from the front limbs, bony spikes out the back of its hands. It is not clawed in the same way as the ones that attacked us, but it does have spikes. It seems wet, like its whole body is drenched not only in the blood of my friend, but in mucus. I don't know how I know in this moment, but I know that I cannot afford to be touched by this thing. My instinct is to fight or flee. I do not any longer have my sword, as I gave it to my now deceased friend, whose body I see over the shoulder of this thing, far down to the altar of the temple in which I stand. The sword is still found on his body, I can see from behind, but was I able to get to it? Could I call on the gods to attack this thing with magic, knowing that if I attacked it, the gods would remove their protection on me? Entry. It was around that moment that I had to ask myself cleanly, do I run? Though parts of me wished to stay and deal with this creature before it could infect another as it had my friend, the more self-preservation part of me decided that yes, I should run. Whether through the will of the gods or through the will of something else stronger than the gods, this creature was able to push past my protection of sanctuary as if it was nothing. And as I turned to run, it reached out with its claws and unfortunately found purchase across the back of my thigh. Thankfully, its attack seemed somewhat minimal for what it would be capable of. But minimal is perhaps all it requires. It drew blood, but I was able to get away. As I ran through the front of this temple, the doors seemingly opening behind me, it did not seem to follow. I was now out in the open city centre of this ancient, eons old, abandoned place. Realizing that this thing could have infected me with the same creature, the same egg, to be an incubator as my friend was, I find a place to slump down to the ground, pushing through the pain that is in my legs. I try to get purchase on seeing the wound, but it is at a difficult angle. Entry. I must apologize for how difficult this may be to write. I have blood all over my hands and fingers, and I cannot help but stain the page. But the wound is just too deep. While it does not cleanse myself of the and the holy water seemed to help, it has stitched itself close, and I am not feeling currently any stomachache. Entry. I have washed my hands now of the holy water. Alas, that was the last of it. With my curiosity, the gods have always rewarded me a certain understanding of items, objects, and spells, an ability to identify further than others. Knowing that this usually takes me around 10 minutes to do, I wonder if I should call on some of my energy to do so quicker, or whether I should conserve my energy and take the time to ritually identify whether this thing has infected me. Entry. I decided to take the time to avoid panic. I feel like my mind has returned to me now. It has been several hours since I saw my friend's body. I feel stable enough that I was able to conduct the ritual. While focusing on the ritual of my leg, I should be able to ascertain which spells, if any, are currently affecting me. The gods returned no information. Either they have no power here which is terrifying in its own right, or I have no information to glean, as no spells are affecting me. It is hard to know which thought terrifies me more. If there is nothing affecting me, then everything that is happening is real. But if the gods have abandoned me, there must be something bigger. Something that even the gods are dwarfed by. It is not a thought I wish to engage in further. Running some basic medicine checks on my legs, it seems that I did not get nicked of any arteries or veins. The blood loss was minimal, and while I am uncomfortable, it does not seem like it is infected. Not as much as I can tell anyway. As a way of ascertaining which is the reality I find myself in, I call out to the gods to bless me. To my delight, it seems to work. I feel their calming presence. Their blessing seems that they are aware of me, so I am left to discover that there was no spell affecting me. I am really, truly alone. Entry. I'm beginning to wonder if there is some god beyond and before those that we worship. Perhaps accidentally we made a sacrifice to one during the cleansing. If there were gods before this gods, surely we would know. Surely there is nothing that has to the gods the power that the gods have to us. The implications of such lead to such insignificance that it does not bear thinking about. As I think about the possibility of the fragility of a life such as mine to a god so vast as to be beyond the gods themselves, I find myself almost slipping from my composure again. Entry. I decided to stop thinking about it and focus on my immediate needs. If the gods are still answering my prayer, then I have no major concern about food or water. My primary concern is that that creature still lives down in this city with me, and while it did not leave the temple to follow, It may when it gets old enough. Entry. I cannot help but the paranoia is sinking in. I'm considering that Joletha did not follow us down the hole. She took us to that ritual room in the first place. Perhaps she knew it was coming. Perhaps it wasn't accidental. Entry. Entry. I have removed the previous entry, as I felt it too blasphemous. I must apologize to the gods for even thinking such a thing. Entry. I have considered the possibility that I could create water, and then appeal to the gods for the ceremony of creating holy water. If having holy water before was useful, perhaps it would be worth doing, despite the energy it would cost me. Entry. I have braved going back to the city centre in view of the temple doors, and I find them closed. I did not close them, but perhaps they closed themselves after I left. If I was to try and attack this creature, I would not be able to do so from outside the temple. Perhaps I need to find a safe place to rest and recover some strength. Entry. I managed to find my way to the edge of the city. I found an abandoned house that was easy enough to climb into and had no multiple floors to distract my mind. There I performed the ritual to create water, and then I further performed the ritual to cast a ceremony on that water to create holy water. I was able to collect it in my water skin and replenish my needs. I also drank of the water that I did not ceremoniously bless. I feel my strength returning to me somewhat, but my wound in my leg seems not to be healing. It still throbs as if it is freshly struck. Entry. This is most peculiar. I have never failed to heal a wound before. Not one that is simply non-magical. But when I reached down and required of the gods to cure this wound of mine, the wound did not close. I could feel the magic within me. I could feel the gods answering my call to prayer for this response. But I was unable to close the wound. I'm starting to get hungry, and my energy is depleting. I could create food for myself, but it would leave me relatively weak. Having said that, if I do not eat, I will probably be weak anyway. Entry. I'm beginning to doubt whether the gods that are answering my prayers are indeed the gods that I have worshipped my whole life. With the same effort it takes me to create food, I could instead, however, require of the god Yamasan that he disguise my appearance from divination, spells, and perception. I may call out to him for a protection against detection, but doing so would prevent me being able to eat tonight. Entry. I have found a ration within my pocket. Perhaps this ration would be enough for today. Entry. I am going back and forth on whether I should create food for myself or whether I should prevent detection so that I may rest. Entry. I have decided to devour the rations. They are meager and dull. and they were the last of the food that I had left. But it has left me just enough strength to call out to Yarmison and ask for his aid in non-detection. I feel confident in saying that I cannot be targeted by divination spells or perceived through magical scrying. I feel a little more confident resting here for the night. Thankfully, the control I have over my own mind through years of practice as a cleric is strong enough that I am able to calm myself into a state where I can get into a trance. I am met with a vision during the trance. Entry. I write this in fits and starts as I slip in and out of trance. I stand by the shores of a large, stagnant pool. I think from my studies that it is called something like something I forget. When I try to find words to describe, it's like something is blocking it from me. I think it begins with a P. Something sits nearby. It is a creature not too dissimilar to bullywugs. I am unfamiliar with bullywugs, but I have read about them. It is much smaller, however, more the size of a common rat. It has something on its back, pustules of sorts. It gets to the shores of this body of water, and it seems to drop this pustule from its back. And as it breaks open, thousands upon thousands of these flagellating cells, barely bigger than the head of a pin, they spread outwards. Instantly I see creatures using the offspring, the spawn of this creature, as the basis for an entire ecosystem. Fish from beneath the water seem to lap up the creatures faster than they can even feed. Creatures from above seem to swoop down and splash into the water. They are bat-like, but with softer skin, like something akin to textured clothing. Perhaps this is what the adventurers describe as birds. It seems that whatever this creature is that spawned these things, it reproduces and survives through a game of numbers. These things are entirely helpless. They have no defenses. It is entirely a game of chance. The creature that spawned them seems as indifferent to their survival as it is to the molecules of air that surround it as it breathes. Does it have no love for its own creation? Does it have no understanding of their pain and suffering as they get eaten and devoured by all manner of creatures? Some of the flagellating cells seem to have worked their way out of the water and up onto the shore, where they flop around helplessly, drowning in air. Does this creature have no concern or love for the things so far beneath it? No. As it leaps away on powerful back legs. It seems it has no concern. Its only concern was to reproduce, and it has done that. With thousands of these things, there are more than could feed all of the animals that come to feed on them, and so some are bound to survive, and that's all it cares about. As long as some survive, it has done its job, and it has no love lost for the things beneath it. It is a horrifying thought, and one that shakes my very foundation in the gods. What if they have so little thought for us, that we are simply things, ways for them to reproduce? Entry. I feel sick. Entry. It has been 2 hours, at least, and the sickness is not getting worse. Entry. I am not getting better. I do not feel like I rested. Despite the fact that I was in and out of trance, I do not feel like any of my wounds have removed. In fact, I feel worse. I feel like they've opened. There are sores on my skin. I feel too dry. Entry. I have bathed myself in the holy water that I made for myself yesterday. Unfortunately, I have used every drop of it, as I could not prevent the obsession that came from needing to clean. My skin needed to be wet. My fingers hurt. Entry. Whole page. What do I do? I try to pray. I cannot rid my mind of these doubts, it seems. Have the gods abandoned me? No. If they abandoned me, perhaps that would indicate that they once cared. No, I cannot think like that. They are the only way that I can get out. This is a test. I must resist the thoughts of despair. Perhaps I am in a city that the gods cannot see. Perhaps this city was made before them. The word still comes to my mind. Fubudnaye. I cannot help but see it written in my friend's blood. Fubudnaye. Perhaps I should not be writing it in this journal. As I write it a second time, I feel it is wanting me to write it again. If the gods have abandoned me, perhaps Fubudnoye will not. I implore to the God of language. I implore to the God of language for his aid in speaking. And I speak it aloud. My composure utterly destroyed, I feel my mind break. As my mind breaks under the horrors of what is to come and what came before, I feel compelled to flee. Fear fills me. Terror. Words are not enough. I cannot... It was not fear. It was more than terror. It was... Entry. I am falling. As I fled the city, compelled by my own broken mind. It must have been at least an hour ago. I missed my footing and fell. At first a familiar feeling, as one that got me into this position in the first place, a trap that was laid for me to fall into a pit. But unlike that first time, there were no rocks to fall past. No craggy outcrops, no scratching tufts, and furthermore, no bottom. I did not slam into stonework. In fact, I did not speed up. It seems that my descent has slowed. I still feel sick. There is pressure between my eyes, as if my eyes are trying to force themselves apart onto my head. My skull feels like it's changing, my mouth growing wider. Entry. I would say that I am still falling, were it not for the fact that the air is no longer moving past me. But it is thick. Even moving my hand across this page feels like I am pushing against some substance more than air. Entry. It is getting harder to hold my pen in the hand, a hand that is transforming. You must forgive my handwriting, as my fingers are growing longer and thinner. Entry. My hand is now able to grasp the quill, and I do not seem to require ink. Entry. It is wet. The air is water. I have found myself deep, deep in the darkest of oceans, and I cannot breathe. I cannot see through this water, but I can hear that there is something here with me. I can feel it. If I reach out, perhaps it can save me. Maybe I can make a connection with this thing that has the power to help me. I feel pressure building up in the water before me. Something in the water of a vast magnitude is approaching me at fast speed, though I cannot see it beyond the reaches of my darkness. Swimming from the outskirts of my sight, a small creature, a worm-like thing propelling itself through the water with undulating movements back and forth rhythmically. It is far too small to create the pressure that I felt. It approaches my face and stops swimming. It is close enough to reach out and grab. I am blacking out. I cannot breathe. Perhaps this thing is a gift. I feel something is telling me to take it. My mind is strong enough to know that I should not take it. But what should I do? I am dying. I am caught in a perpetual state of drowning. Were this normal or real, I should be dead by now, and yet I am able to enter into my journal. I draw on what limited power I have left to destroy water. Focusing the last remnants of my understanding of the gods of water, I focus on the water directly above my head, and in an instant turn it to air. Entry. I was able to breathe. I formed myself into the bubble of the gallons of water that instantly was destroyed, and the bubble seemed to carry me to the surface, away from that wriggling worm, away from whatever it was that was trying to get my attention. I pray. I try to be devout. I apologize to the gods and what they did. I try to forgive them for ignoring me. And before long, I broke the surface. Entry. I have been floating in this vast ocean for some time now. It is unclear to me how long. My handwriting is getting easier to use despite this new appendage. I am still in tremendous pain, and I feel like my wounds have gotten worse. I now feel less than half the man I was before. Half the person I was before. I wonder if I shall spend the rest of my days floating in this endless void, or whether there is anything that will see me as significant enough to pay me mind. Entry. I do not even recognize my own body anymore. I am slimy and scaly. When I conjure light to see for land, it highlights how green I look. Entry. One benefit of becoming amphibious like this is that my hands are now webbed, and it does not cost me nearly as much energy to swim. Entry. I chose a direction and went. There was little else I could do. I felt sicker and sicker. I feel another day of this and I will die. Entry. Before the end of the day, I found shore. I climbed out from the water's edge onto dry land for the first time in what feels like days. And it was only then that I realized I am still in a cave. I have never even read of an ocean this vast, far beneath the inner caves. I only know that I am in a cave because of the air being stale and still, and the absolute pitch darkness that there is around me. The extent of my vision in the dark does not extend to any walls or ceiling of this cave, and sound is muffled before it has the chance to bounce off of any echoing surface and come back to me. Entry. I don't know how long I stayed in that cave before I saw it, but it started to come out of the darkness. With no background to adjust it to, the sense of scale that came from it was impossible to determine. At first it seemed to be some sort of tentacle reaching out, as in my dream many nights ago. It seemed to reach out to the side of it, as one would put one's hands through the threshold of a door that was too small for you in order to aid balance as you force the rest of your body through. The tentacle seemed to slap against something that reverberated in great sound, and perhaps it found the edge of the cave after all. At first it was small in my mind, no bigger than the one that reached out to me, no bigger than my own appendages now. But the echoing slam from the stonework almost knocked me off my feet, and it started to adjust scale in my mind. What's more is, as the second tentacle came forwards in a similar motion, pushing upwards to find some purchase to help it push itself through a gap yet unseen, it found the ceiling with another ear-splitting slam, and a small pebble dislodged. It was all I could do to see it fall in this moment, this decaying roof granite seemingly falling to the earth. But it fell in slow motion, and my brain suddenly had context to ascertain new scale to this thing. This small pebble was not falling in slow motion. It was just further away than I thought. The pebble became larger as my brain quickly adjusted scale to it, and then it slammed the ground with such force that it knocked me off my feet. The pebble that this tentacle dislodged from the ceiling must have been a mile wide. Trying to comprehend the size of the thing that gave that tentacle motion, my mind broke once again. Not to a degree that left me bereft forever, but it did incur another bout of mania. And forgive the hand-writing once again. I've been forced to use my non-dominant hand. My other hand has gone numb. Entry. Thankfully, the psychosomatic disability only lasted a few minutes. Long enough for this thing to get closer. Fubudnoye. This sound of its name became clearer once again. Fubudnoye started to echo from the cavern below it, echoing in the voices of hundreds. Hundreds of people's voices chanting Fubudnoye, Fubudnoye, and my mind suddenly understood the context for it. This creature trapped down here, wherever here is just longing to be released, as any such caged creature would. As Fubudnaye approached, I was unable to fathom what it even looked like, and so my mind connected to those things beneath instead. More things that came up to attack us. Red ones. More things that erupted from my friend's chest. Blue ones. And more that looked like myself. Green ones. And I realized in this moment, if it even sees us, we are no more to it than the spawn was to that froggish creature. But it felt good to have purpose. It felt good to realize once again that I am part of something bigger. I realized in that moment that the thing that drew me to the church was not the gods or their care for us. The gods have no care for us. We are nothing but bacteria to them. No, the thing that I was drawn to was a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of something larger, a sense of destiny. As I said at the start of the book, what I was destined to become was determined before I was even conceived. Entry. And so has my final entry to this journal been completed. If you have read to the end, that bodes well for you. You have the sort of mind that is curiously attracted to learning more about the world, beyond that which we are told to understand, beyond the notion of the gods being the oldest and most powerful beings in our reality. As proven by your ability to read this deep speech, your obsession with reading and consuming more knowledge should start manifesting soon, if it hasn't already. After which you will find yourself with a strong desire to begin journaling your experiences. You have joined the family now. You are part of the spawning. If you are blessed by the Great Ones, with powers of magical manipulation or great physical strength, you should prove useful enough to the recruiters that you will survive your town's culling. If not, well, at least you shall make for good nutrients for Fubudnoye. Happy Halloween.
All hail the algorithm gods. Comment, like, and subscribe. Ooh, ah.